And welcome to the Talon Outdoors Show. I'm Charlie.
And I'm JD.
And I'm Grant.
All right, we've got a couple of special guests in the studio today. Well, I don't know special. Paul's here.
Paul is special.
And special. He's like short bus special.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. Our fishing professional. And yeah, we got with deer season here, you know, we've been talking a lot about chronic waste disease and things here in Florida. And for our Alabama audience, y'all need to be paying attention too, because this is obviously an issue up in that area. There's increased testing. You've got some of the stuff in Alabama. We got George Warthen with FWC. George, what's your official title?
Yeah, I'm the director of the Division of Hunting and Game Management. And so what that is for FWC, that's everything game species, everything you can hunt, including alligators, but also our hunter safety and public shooting ranges program.
Okay, and you do manage the shooting ranges around Florida. We've spoken before because y'all get funding and so
we don't.
Well, not federal funding. It's all private. But you've done some, just real quick before we get to CWD, your work finishing up some ranges and doing some improvements down in South Florida on some of the public ranges. Where were those again?
Yeah, two that we're looking to finish up, or really one to revamp. The main project is our Webb shooting range on Babcock Webb. It's the oldest public shooting range that we have in Florida. It's also the most used public shooting range in Florida. And it's due for a rehab. You know, it doesn't have electricity. It needs some improvements. And since it's our number one in use, we want to put some funds back into it for folks. And it's long awaited. The other one is the West Palm Beach shooting range. And so if folks haven't been down there yet and you're in that neck of the woods, I'd check it out. It's really built out to Olympic specs. It's really going to attract some Olympic shooting sports folks to the area. It's another long awaited, since the public shooting range closed down decades ago there in the area. It's a big concentration of shooters here in Florida and folks that are recreational shooters. And so it was one where the community wanted us to build it. It took us 12 years to get started, and we're trying to wrap up our final phase.
Well, you know, and we because you also have the one here in the Apalachicola National Forest. Is that right. Y'all's as well? Yeah. I mean, so when we first had our first discussion, we saw funding in this area, and we're freaking out because we're like, we're going to go broke if y'all do all this stuff. But that's not your goal as an organization. Your goal is to provide a place for people to shoot where other places don't exist and there's not a ready market for it, that kind of thing. So we're really not at odds on that. We're on the same page, as long as we're not trying to build a gun range next to that big fancy Olympic place, which would be a stupid business move. But yeah, I mean, so that arm is under you, where you're actually helping to provide a place for the public in the state of Florida to shoot. And there's a lot of places where there's not much except people's backyards. Of course, you get away from civilization. There's plenty of places to shoot, just not necessarily safely.
Yeah, and you know, that's a big part of it. But one of the important things is, you know, how it ties into hunting is, we know that to become a hunter, you have to be a shooter first, whether that's archery or with a firearm. Yeah. And so providing those safe places for families to get into the sport, but also to practice and become hunters, become outdoorsmen and women, then that's a big part of it. And you guys know, as range owners, and you have a great range and retail facility here, conservation funding throughout the country, but really primarily in Florida, comes from the purchase of firearms, ammunition, and archery. And far more recreational shooters contribute to that than even hunters.
Well, we're glad we're helping to fund that today. It's busy in the shop today. Yeah. Everybody's getting ready. I came in, somebody's out there getting rifle scopes mounted, and you know, we're coming to see the gunsmith about their rifle grouping and all that stuff. We get to see that end of it on a daily basis, and so when all the training stuff that we do out here as well. So but we had you on the show primarily to talk about some of the issues that are going on. So we know that there's an enforcement arm of FWC, and that's the guys out there with the badges and the guns and writing tickets and stuff. That's not your world. Your world is managing and helping to, I'm sure you help craft policies and rules and things like that. Is that true? You're nodding, but the people on the radio can't hear you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I got to get used to being on the radio show, right? So that's absolutely right. You know, FWC is broken up into 6 divisions. One's law enforcement. There's other arms that's hunting and game management, habitat and species, fresh fish, marine fish research. So they each have a different specific task, but what we do is manage game species for their well-being and for the well-being of people and for their long-term success.
Okay. I'm sitting here drinking this Lowe's water, and all I can say for it is it's wet.
It is wet and cold.
Wet.
It's just not delicious.
Anyway. I'm sorry. We got to do some humor in the show. So you've been hosting these seminars, and I went to the one in Marianna recently about chronic waste disease in Florida. You know, we've been dreading this for the longest time because we were having to bone out stuff, I think, in Georgia to bring it to Florida already, and then there was and then we travel and hunt and all that, and so. Is chronic waste disease, and I've talked about it on the show, but I'm not that smart. So what is that?
Tough question to get across because it's a really complex disease, but I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. So chronic wasting disease.
Don't say prions.
I know, right? I can avoid prions. We can do that.
Okay.
So I try really hard to avoid them.
Yeah.
So
I don't eat deer brains.
Yeah. Yeah, chronic wasting disease, it's just what it sounds like. Chronic means it takes a long time to develop. This isn't going to develop in a deer overnight, 2 years usually until we see the symptoms in a deer. Wasting, the deer wastes away as it gets this disease that inhibits its brain, right? It starts to get spongy in appearance, and they're going to get confused, and it's going to cause their eventual death. What it is it's not caused by a bacteria or a virus like we think of other diseases, and here's where I'll avoid prions. This is caused by a protein. I think most folks, we can think about proteins and how there's those building blocks in our body, and these proteins are misfolded. And we still don't understand a lot about this disease and how it actually then, we know it's taken in by the deer, usually by ingestion or other ways of physical contact, but we don't really know how then it becomes replicated in the body, and this causes the disease. There's a lot of unknowns here, but at its core, it's a protein. And this protein's misfolded. I like to think of it as the deer brings in a bad blueprint, and it starts making that bad blueprint. And if you look at a healthy deer's brain tissue, if you sliced it, looked it under a microscope, it's dense, it's healthy. We can all think of what we've seen in like medical shows and things like that. If we look at a deer that's suffering from chronic wasting disease, it quite literally gets these pockets, these lesions that look like a sponge. So that's going to lead to that deterioration of the deer, and it's always fatal. There's no vaccines. The only prevention we know of now is to use the best methods that we've seen used in other states. We work to keep deer populations at an appropriate level and just try to reduce ways that we're creating places where deer can come into contact where we can control it. We can't control it in every place, but wherever we can help. And that's where you see some of these regulations that people are seeing now that hopefully are in place just for the short term while we get this figured out. But we're going to find out ways to try to mitigate the disease.
So you've got an area that's specifically being targeted right now this year.
That's right.
Because you had a case on a roadkill deer that are the roadkill deer normally submitted, or somebody just did y'all collect this one out of the blue, or what? They
are. That's a good question. And so I can rewind. We found this deer over the summer, and this was a 4.5-year-old deer we found about 6 miles south of the Alabama border on State Road 79. And we found it as roadkill. And that's an important question of why roadkill, because we were looking for roadkill. Mm-hmm. About 2 years ago, we implemented a new process for looking for this disease, and you'll hear us call it our disease surveillance. We used to just look broadly across the state. And so we worked with Cornell University to develop a model that said, where's the most likely places to find CWD, and let's focus more of our efforts there. So we did that. We looked at factors like what kind of deer are most likely to have CWD. Well, we know roadkill deer are more likely, probably because of the confusion that it causes. They wander out into traffic. We know that the disease prevalence is more in adult deer, bucks especially. So we look for those. We also know if you're bordering a state that's known to have CWD, in this case Alabama. And then we look at several other risk factors. That process told us to look at Jackson County first, Holmes County second, and so on. Another big part is we got heavier deer densities in the Panhandle, so that was a big part. So roadkills were important for us to look at. We can also pick those up year-round. So our biologists, our law enforcement officers, they've been asked that when they're driving around the state, they pick up samples. And in this case, a biologist noticed the deer, they took the sample, and it just happened to be the one that tested positive.
Okay. Well, I can tell you there's a lot of roadkill deer on a regular basis between my house and town. It's like, and they just stand out by the road. Okay, well, we're coming in on the break. We're going to have you back on the next segment as well, so we'll continue this conversation. And as far as, helping thin the population, yeah,
I'm all about it.
Yeah, I'm about doing that. Within reason, obviously. You got to be careful joking with the FWC guy. We'll be right back. And we're back. All right, so we're here with George Wharton with the FWC talking about, now this is Florida. I know about half our listening audience in Alabama, so y'all just going to have to work with us on this today. Because same things affect y'all.
I'm sure he talks to the biologist in Alabama.
Yes.
We're close.
So I noticed that in Alabama, I want to get back to where we were, but I noticed in Alabama they're starting to increase the number of drop-off points for CWD testing, particularly along the south of Dothan area.
That's correct.
I was up in Rehoboth the other day. They got a freezer in there with drop-off instructions and the bags and everything, and that wasn't there last year to my recollection. So they're increasing their efforts as well.
They are. We work closely with Alabama, and their efforts right now are to not create any zone that's going to prohibit hunters from having a less than normal season, but they want more samples. They're going to heavily increase sampling and take a look at what happens after this season. So
the area that has been restricted, because there's what is it, D2?
That's right. Yep, DM2.
Okay, DM2. You've got one area that you can't take a deer carcass out of. Is that correct? Can you explain that whole concept?
Yeah, that would be good. You know, what we've done is when we first detected chronic wasting disease in Florida, it triggered a management plan that we've had in place. And know, too, that this is a joint effort between Florida Fish and Wildlife and Florida Department of Agriculture. So for years, we've developed this plan. We've practiced the plan. And so we followed that plan when we found the disease. And it tells us to set up a zone to contain the disease. What we did was we tried to make that zone as small as possible so that it impacted as few hunters, as few people, but it could successfully, hopefully, contain this disease. So we have two different zones in Florida. First one's the most important. That's the chronic wasting disease management zone. And that zone is basically, if you can picture, it's going to be south. It's mostly Holmes County, but it's going to be south of the Alabama line, everything west of 231, east of State Road 81, and north of I-10. And this is on our website, so you can see a picture of this zone. What we do is we use major highways and landmarks because we can't just draw a circle. Otherwise, we draw a 15-mile circle, and we'd say, this is it.
Cut somebody's food plot in half.
So, and if we did that, it would go south of I-10 up into Alabama. We've got to use borders that are recognizable and understandable. So we cut it a little. We made it a little smaller in the south because I-10, although deer get across, it can be a successful barrier for slowing down deer. So in that area, that's where most of the new rules and regulations that are done through executive order, so hopefully these will be temporary, we'll adapt these through time. That's the zone where it's really important for people to know that right now there's a prohibition on feeding deer, and feeding deer, that's everything from your corn, minerals, salt licks, all of it. And that's really important in the early stages. I know it's tough on hunters, but it's important because anything we can do to reduce unnatural congregations of deer, multiple deer putting their noses and mouths in one pile. Now, folks ask us about food plots. Food plots are still allowed. You know, it's tough to say and shut down agricultural operations, things that have a greater economic impact. Food plots, especially smaller food plots, they still can be higher risk. But at this point, we're not looking to just throw everything at it. We want to take careful steps to do what we can. So other important things are carcass transport. If you're hunting within that management zone this season, deer carcass parts high-risk parts cannot leave that zone. So if you kill a deer within that area this season, you're going to want to do all the normal things that you normally would, but also you're going to want to make sure, and just like coming in from another state, you only want to bring out of that zone deboned meat, clean skull caps, clean hides, the same rules that have applied for CWD for when you're bringing things from out of state into our state. If we do that, we can really minimize the risk of bringing this disease out. Now, there's an extended zone you're going to see when you look at the map on the website, and that's the enhanced surveillance zone, and that's Holmes, Washington, and Jackson County. The reason that we have that surveillance zone that's bigger is it's important for us to look for this disease to not only find how many deer might have it, but we need to know how far, right? What's the distribution of this disease? Are we looking at the eye of a hurricane or an outer band? That's really important for us to know. So this year we have the enhanced surveillance zone. So if you're hunting in either three of those counties, Washington, Holmes, or Jackson, this year there's going to be a mandatory check station day on December 9th and 10th. Those are critically important because that's where we're going to get the majority of our samples to try to have a picture, a window into how many deer might have CWD in our area. And so on December 9th and 10th, we're going to have about 20 check stations. Hopefully in the next week or two, we're going to have those posted online where they're at. We're carefully selecting where they're at. We're hoping people don't have to drive more than 15 minutes tops to get to a check station. We're also going to have those set up at certain processors and taxidermists, so folks, keep an eye out. We're going to have that listed really soon. But like I said, about 20 stations to make it simple. On the 9th and 10th, if you harvest a deer, we want you to bring that to us to be sampled. It is mandatory. It is part of that executive order. If you want to stop by with the whole deer, that's fine. We'll take the sample. If not, bring us the head. We can take the sample that way. The biggest thing is we need a head with about 4 inches of the neck, because we're taking samples from the lymph nodes. They're up under the salivary glands. It's called the retropharyngeal lymph node, but it's up under the chin.
I'm glad you said it was under the salivary glands, or I wouldn't have known where it was.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
His throat.
Now that clarified it. I know exactly where that's.
Right there in the throat. Yeah. And then the other important piece is from the base of the brain. But
I didn't know where it was, but he's kind of pointing to his throat.
Yeah, he pointed to his throat. I said, okay.
Got to remember, I'm on radio, right? It's on podcast. But yeah, so basically we just need that head with that couple inches of neck, and our biologist can take those samples. And the other cool thing is we're going to make sure everybody knows how their deer tested, because people ask me all the time, can I eat a deer that has chronic wasting disease? And the Centers for Disease Control, they recommend not eating a deer that's known to have CWD. So if the deer tests positive, it's probably a deer you don't want to eat. We're going to try to get those test results as quick as possible. When you go and drop those deer off or bring it to our sampling station, we're also going to have voluntary coolers throughout the state. When you drop those off, we'll get your reporting number that you use to report your deer now in Florida through the app or on phone. Multiple ways to do that. We've got a website stood up where you can go in, put your reporting number, and you can see real time what your deer is tested.
Well, studies that I've seen on the internet, because they must be true.
Must be true, yeah.
There was studies that showed that the prions, the folded proteins, can't be transmitted to humans through eating of the deer flesh. But then there was one that said that some mice that have just been saturated with it and ended up having some transmission. But where I see the issue is so I go kill a deer, and I submit this head for testing, and I go to the processor, and I've paid them to process all this meat, and now I'm sitting there going, well, I can't get it, I can't catch it. Well, the Centers for Disease, the CDC said I can't. They also the ones that made us wear masks for COVID. So I can tell you right now that the good old boy out there is going to go, well, if I can't catch it, I'm going to eat that meat. Right. But that's on them.
Yeah, everybody's got to evaluate their own risk in this situation. Deer and other wildlife have a host of other diseases, that are out there, and we don't really typically talk about or know about. And so, there's a burden to hunters that you're going to end up killing a deer, bringing it to the processor or processing it yourself, and it's going to sit in the cooler probably, or your freezer, labeled, for probably 2-3 weeks before you get this test back, and that's tough. But it's up to the individual person on how, we're the FWC, we're not human health experts, and all we can do is kind of cite the science that's out there. Thankfully there's never been a case of CWD that's been transferred into humans since we've known about this disease in the 60s. But everybody's got to know their own risk. We're going to make that testing as quick as possible so people, can take that fear. I know I've hunted CWD states for a long time, and my wife is always wanting to know which one came from Florida or which one came from one of those CWD states that you. So, but it's each person, their families have to identify that risk. We're going to be as quick as we can with that testing.
Well, this is really a bridge. So what's happening is that it started out, and you've created deer zombies. All right, and so this is eventually going to break the bridge over to humans, and that's what we're going to have, and it's going to start in Holmes County. Problem is, I know a bunch of folks from Holmes County. Some of them you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So
easy now, you got a bunch of kin folks over there. You just stepped on some bunch of toes.
Well, there you go. I'm just kidding. I don't know anybody from Holmes County. No, yes, I do. Anyway. And some people I know real well. No,
they gonna whoop you.
Yeah. So what else, other than the things we've discussed right now? Is there anything else that you think is super important that people know? Or one thing, real quick. So on the 9th and 10th, somebody shows up with a trophy buck. You're not keeping the head. You're just going to test it, and they're going to leave, and everything's going to be good, right?
That's right. Yeah, there's no part of the process that's going to ruin anybody's mounts. Everybody can keep every part of their deer except for those two little pieces that we need. And so we're also working with taxidermists and processors because they can be a part of this process. And I'll tell you, any taxidermists or processors that are listening, we have a program where we can reimburse you for this sample, and that makes it easier on hunters too. If they can just go to the processor and get a sample taken there and check their deer, we're happy to work with you on that. We'll pay $20 per sample to a processor or taxidermist. So that head you're going to throw away at the taxidermist's office, if you'd like to collect a sample for us, contact the FWC. We can work with you on reimbursement. And we're also standing up a program. You talked about processing earlier, and I don't want people to fear bringing their deer to a processor and getting it processed this year. Keep doing that. Keep hunting. Keep going to your processor. Pay to get your custom sausages made. Don't hold back. If you have a deer that tests positive, not only are we going to make sure that you get your deer back, you can harvest another deer, it's not going to count towards your limit, but also we're working with the Wildlife Foundation of Florida, a nonprofit organization, to where we can reimburse your processing fees. So if you're one, I hope that we don't find any more positives, but if you were one, you paid $100 in processing, we'll work with you to get you reimbursed. We don't want this to be a burden.
That's awesome.
That is
cool. Awesome.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So I got a question for you, and I know we're coming towards the end of this segment, but where do you, as a biologist, as a scientist, where do you think this? How did this get to Florida?
That's a tough question. We will never know. Most states don't have that luxury to know. It's tough. We've looked at this deer. We've done genetic testing. We know it's a deer that's from Holmes County. It matches the genetics of deer in Holmes County. So
it didn't get out of a high fence or get imported or whatever. We
don't believe that. So you can't point at one thing or another. Most states never will, and that's unfortunate. And this probably isn't the first deer to have it in Florida. It's just the first one we found.
Sure.
So that's a tough thing. We just have to know that we have it, and we're going to move forward addressing it.
I think it's been prevalent out west more than it has in the southeast. It's been very prevalent in Texas and Mississippi even. I think it's been in some parts of Mississippi.
That's correct. Just recent years here in the southeast.
All right, we'll be right back.
Bottom of the hour segment. I can't really say it's the Wiregrass segment so much anymore, because now with the new video based show, it's for everybody that wants to stream this thing. And correct me if are we streaming this on?
It's on the podcast.
It's on the podcast.
All your podcast platforms, you'll hear this.
So unless you listen
only on the radio in Tallahassee.
On the radio. It's like on the frontage road up in Dothan. Just off the frontage road. Yeah. It gets confusing because the show's going through this transition period right now where we are on YouTube and we are on Rumble. So that Rumble's a paid service. YouTube is not. We're just waiting for YouTube to shut us down because we say the wrong thing. But
it's coming.
It's coming because y'all hadn't seen all the content yet. I mean, there's the polo. No, it's just the stuff that we are going to be coming back from our trips and our excursions with video that we will be plugging into this portion of the show. And so, we want you to listen to us on the radio. I mean, that's where our advertisers are. That's what you have access to on Saturday mornings. But when you get into the streaming world, when watching the video and all that.
Because not everybody can pick up the radio stations.
Not everybody can pick up the radio stations.
I've had two different people come in the store this week and said, "I'm so happy that you're doing this YouTube thing because where I live, the radio signal is spotty." And I'm like, "Man, I want to live. I don't know where you live, but that's where I want to live."
You want a neighbor? Yeah, I can pick up way down below Mariana. I can pick up 103.9 out of Dothan. I cannot pick up 100.7. So out of Tallahassee, but there's a bigger tower in Dothan. It's probably on a hill, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where it's at. Somewhere out there near the gun range, I think, or over near Fort Rucker or whatever they're calling it.
I just didn't know there were still places exist where you can't. I mean, he's like, yeah, no phone service, the radio bear. I'm like, man, they piping in sunshine to wherever you at. I'll take me some of that. I like that.
I keep saying Fort Rucker. They renamed Fort Rucker, but I can't ever remember the name of it, so I don't know what it is. Something else. It's named after somebody who legitimately is a war hero and all that stuff. I don't know.
We know what you're talking about, though.
I wonder if everybody else that's got Fort Rucker this and Fort Rucker that, and there's all the roads named for. I wonder if they all got, are they going to follow suit, or are they just
happening all over the country?
This is wokeism in America, folks. That's what this is. It's wokeism. Everybody's. What was it? I wish I could wake up and it not be true, but it is. But it is.
But it is.
Living in a new world with an old soul. Yep.
Yeah. I hearken back to there was a movie that's No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Remember that movie? Mm-hmm. I kind of live that sometimes and just shake my head going, in the words of Buford T. Justice, what's the world coming to? It's just, it's a rough time right now all over the world, and it's it's a scary time.
A scary time for armadillos in my mama's yard. I can tell you that.
You finna get after them?
Because Robert, my stepdad, apparently, Mama spends a lot of time on her flowers and her garden and her peppers, and not so much on peppers anymore because she used to make all that pepper sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few years, it turned into work.
Yeah.
So she's got her special batches that's still around. She makes a little bit, but she's got all these flowers and bulbs. Them armadillos. Robert's up. I had to get him a box of 410 shells of the day. He wanted some number 4. I got him. All we had was BBBs, which will work. And so he's up to like 12 or 13 of them now.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty good.
He can track. He'd come home. There's one. I walked out in the yard and it just stood there for a minute. And I said, yeah, I know he did. He's not just standing there. Hang on just a minute. I got something for you.
I can't get him. I can't. I go out and let the dog out at night before I go to bed, and that's when the armadillos are there, and she gets after them pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, you mess up and catch one of them things and wish you didn't.
I will tell you that when the dog brings home the stinky, putrid remains of one. Yeah, in the smell. I'm like, what is that doggone bird dog chewing on in the backyard? And you go out there and it's like possums and armadillos, and man, that's bad. Well, hope y'all got some value out of this bottom of an hour segment. See y'all in a minute. And we're back. We're back with George Wortham with the FWC talking about chronic waste disease. This is going to be the CWD show. And
easy title for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Creating the podcast.
Dear Zombies. So you mentioned that if taxidermy, who all can get $20 a head for bringing you samples? Who can do that? Taxidermists, processors.
You got it right there. Taxidermists and processors.
So can a good old boy that goes around and cuts the head off a roadkill bring him in and get $20?
Hey, big man.
Because if you open that up, there will be.
We'll get a lot
big
of
man, let me hold $20.
I know rednecks that'll run off the road to hit a deer to collect that $20.
We'll get a lot of samples.
Well, how much damage do to your truck? Well, that's what I got this bumper for. That was
I got one.
I'm sorry. So
if you hit enough of them in a
y'all don't do that. That's I have eaten roadkill.
Say $20
we get those back in the day when it was deputy sheriffs. You'd get that roadkill and you're out there on that crash and that deer just died and
call your buddy. Hey man.
We're like, hey man, we got a deer out here on the side of the road.
That's a good use of the resource.
Well, it didn't go to waste. I mean, you show up. I mean, it was one of there's some.
$20 a head. My yard deer is starting to look pretty enticing.
That's funny, but taxidermists and processors primarily, because the way we have it set up, it's going to be a business that gets reimbursed.
So my processor, I'm going to get 10 of that 20. I'm going to bring him a head and go, hey, turn that in.
Hey, work it out with them. But and so the more people that sign up for that, there's not only do we want to make sure that we're getting money into the local economy during this time, rather than having a state employee at a check station, if we can get money into a local business, that's important important for us. We want processors and taxidermists to be successful, but on the flip side, then we're going to get samples at a reasonable cost, so saving the state money.
Hunters being hunters means being a conservationist to a great degree, and they need to get involved in this because we need to stop this thing. We need to stop this stuff, and as best we can, do everything we can to manage this, stop this, keep this from infecting our herd, because in some states it has been absolutely devastating to their hunting tourism stuff, and it can be devastating. There's I was reading an article where a lady had a herd in a high fence, and the high fence operations out in Texas have been financially just decimated by this disease inside their fences, where they've got a big 1,000 acres fenced in or whatever, and their whole herd gets it, and they go in there and they lose everything. Well, we don't want to lose the resource. We love to hunt and all that, so we people need to be involved in it. Hunters need to be involved in it so that we can put a stop to this stuff.
The thing is, it's different. It's changing. Anytime y'all change anything, everybody is like, well, that's not the way we've always done it. And yes, that's true. But the thing is it's an ever-evolving world, and we're always having to constantly look at, okay, how do we better manage our resources? I mean, not everybody's going to agree with some new fishing limit for something off in the water and this, and everybody's going to argue and say whatever. And they're generally looking out, for what they think. They also don't have all the information that you guys have. And when it comes to, and you don't deal with that stuff, do you? You deal with four-legged critters and birds and you do deal with birds and stuff like that too.
If you can hunt it, it's in our division, including alligators. So.
Yeah. So the thing is there's somebody's got to analyze the science. Somebody's got to be counting numbers, and Lord knows we're not short on alligators right now, but that's why there are so many nuisance gator trappers and hunters. I guess you've got those in zones and stuff. You're going to come back for a show on alligators later on when it starts getting close to that. When do you start putting in for those tags and stuff?
That's going to be this summer.
Summer.
And I'll tell you, if alligator hunters are listening here in Florida, stay tuned for our December commission meeting, FWC commission meeting. That's where we're going to bring hunting rules and regulations. Every year in December, we bring our hunting rules and regulations. But also, we're looking to create some more alligator hunting opportunities, and we're hoping to present on that in December. So stay tuned. We're hoping to make a new tag type. We're working hard. We hear everybody saying we want more opportunity. There's plenty of alligators. We hear you, and we're working on it. So stay tuned. But I'm happy to come back and talk about alligators. It's growing in popularity. That's good.
This may be a huge question that do a whole nother show on, but I'm hearing every day from customers from the coastal area that come up here to do business with me. What about the bears?
Yeah,
it's I am hearing every day from South Leon County, Wakulla, Franklin, Gulf.
Mm-hmm. You can't hunt bears or the
I know you can't, but there's a whole bunch of people that are wishing and hoping.
When you have that day, all of the tree hugging folks just have a conniption fit because you shot some bears because they're lovable. I have been to a call on Highway 20 where a woman's dog ran out and barked at a bear, and the bear ate the dog in front of the woman. And they came out and tranquilized the bear from the tree and moved it. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, I don't know that bear to live through that experience. I didn't mean to say that in front of you, but
I'm assuming the bear issue is being studied, addressed, and worked on as we speak because of the uproar in general from those coastal bear areas.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll be heading down to Franklin County after this and hanging out with folks down there tonight. But yeah, it's an issue that could definitely take up a whole nother discussion. It can be a complicated issue, but it's got some simplicity to it as well. But the bottom line is, the agency is going to continue to look at ways to where we can best conserve bear populations and also work with folks, especially in areas where they're seeing impacts from bears that are becoming problematic in a community, right? And so we're going to be continuing to have a bigger presence in those coastal communities. Next week, I'll be visiting with Liberty and Gulf counties as well. And so, this is an ever-moving target in managing bears in a way that's acceptable for all Floridians. And I'm confident we're going to get there. But it's a tough discussion. It's much different than alligators and deer.
Yeah. I know it is, and it's just I hear it every day from people, and I'm sure you're hearing it every day from people, and yeah, there are practices that we can do better, and just like I told somebody the other day, I have zero desire to hunt a bear, to kill a bear, and I'm a hunter. That's not my thing. I'm not opposed to it, but not my thing. It's not something I'm going to go out of my way to go hunt, but there has to be a way to that humans and bears can coexist to some degree, and I think a lot of it's probably that the bears are no longer in fear of humans, so you got to figure out how to scare the bear without necessarily hunting the bear.
Well,
so,
we're developing more and more places for the bear habitat. So
we've got a big state, a growing population of people, and you've got healthy wildlife populations in general. The same goes with alligators.
Alligators too. Yeah.
Crocodiles is another one that actually falls into our program, and we're seeing them do really well, expanding into areas. And so you've got great conservation measures throughout Florida that have had species come back and be healthy, and at the same time we've got healthy people populations, and a lot of these animals and people interact in certain places, and we're going to have to continue to focus on it, have adaptive plans that address all those animals, bears included. And when you look at the bear management plan, it includes hunting and many other tools that we can use, and as Floridians, it's a big job to come together and talk to folks and find out what works for everybody in a way that we can get to the right places. So bears and other wildlife, as we grow as a state, it's good for the economy. We just have to figure out how we all interact, especially in places that are growing. Here in the Panhandle, we're seeing growth, that I grew up in Peninsular Florida and the East Coast, and so I grew up seeing that, and we're seeing more of it here in the Panhandle. And we're just going to have to keep adapting.
So, real quick before you go, you and I had a conversation about deer corn out in the store a little while ago. You mentioned something about feeding corn that gets old, just pouring it on the ground is not good because it develops aflatoxin and it can kill your turkeys. Real quick, we got about less than a minute. Can you kind of hit that?
A minute's tough for aflatoxin. We could take an hour on that. But I would just say,
take me that long to say it.
Yeah, I know, right? So I would just say, feeding wildlife, especially in hunting purposes, using corn, you can do a lot of good things. But just like any feed, you just want to be careful heading into this hunting season that you're using the appropriate feeders that are keeping your feed dry. In Florida, it's hot, even through the winter. And so when you have corn, any kind of food source like that piling up on the ground, it can build up bacteria. And often we overlook its impacts to wildlife because we don't see it. But those aflatoxins can be deadly to turkeys. They can really cause some liver damage, health problems in deer. So, we could definitely talk about in another episode, but I would just say, using feed for wildlife is excellent. You can do a lot of good biology with it, but ask people to just think about how they're distributing that here in Florida. Good dry feeders that's feeding the right amount at the right time. Not only can that be helpful for those wildlife, but also can help you with those impacts to bears and other issues.
So that's what you're saying is that you come here and buy a deer feeder, not just pour it on the ground. So there from the director of all right. Hey, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you very much. We'll get to our fishing segment next when we come back in just a minute. Look forward to having you back as soon as it's a timely topic, which is very soon.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we're back. So I appreciate Director Worthen, George. I don't know people's titles, man. I don't even like when people call me Mr. I appreciate him coming on the show because that's probably one of the more informative on the. We've been talking about CWD for a while, probably boring a bunch of y'all. And
it is something we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
As sportsmen, as outdoors people, as hunters, and just as people that care about our environment. It has been devastating in other parts of the country.
Well, you talked on the break about you up there in the Clarn Lakes area and all the deer up there and the high concentration, and that's where these deer are really susceptible. Is the high concentrations of deer like that. And I didn't understand the whole not feeding them until he said he said when you got a corn pile and they're all sticking their nose down there in it, it passes through saliva, and exactly.
Wow.
And so that's why they're saying you can't bait deer over there because of that. And they just started letting you bait deer up in Alabama, I think, not long ago, and this might end up affecting that. You see, that's where I could see if it became a problem, it could change the way we do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because if you ended up with a real problem in an area, then all of a sudden they're looking, okay, well, how can we limit?
Yeah, and the first step is probably going to be to take the ability to put corn out,
Yeah.
And I would hate to see that. I know a lot of people don't agree. There's hunters that don't agree with using corn to attract deer.
I don't care what they think.
I don't either. It makes it easier to harvest deer. Just bottom line. And if it makes it easier for kids, and it makes it easier for everybody. And it's just something we've been doing here in Florida for a long time.
I think, in my opinion, and this is not in my opinion, we've got a really high doe concentration. We got a lot big.
The herd is the herd numbers and whatever in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama is just fine. There's more than plenty of them.
Yeah, and but the more you have, the more susceptible they are to get
That's
these
correct.
diseases and stuff because they're in more
have to be managed. They have to be managed.
Right. So. Andy mentioned depredation permits, and I actually have some for our place now because of the damage they've been doing to the crops on our property, and so it's going to be. I've done this before when I was farming peas back in the 90s, and we were hunting deer. And the depredation permits, yes, you can hunt deer at night. I mean, that's part of it. That's the easier time to take them sometimes because that's when they come out. They're nocturnal, and so I'll be doing some of that in the near future. Not to make light of it because it's a serious deal. I go by my sister's house on the way home, and out there in the field, there would be a minimum of 18 deer at a time in this little 14-acre field. The man planted soybeans out there. There's nothing but dirt. He couldn't even harvest them. There was nothing left, and there's still some fields out there that hadn't been harvested. But there's man, I mean, it's to the point where, and they're out there in the peanuts and the cotton, and they're doing damage you don't really notice, but then the yields are lower. With soybeans, they just eat them all the way down to the ground. There were whole fields out there, and they're still there, that are literally 8 inches tall, plenty of soybeans on them down at the ground, but there's just, so yeah, we got permits, and I just don't have the with my aching back and hurt fingers and everything else, I'm gonna have a hard time. So I've been devising ways of installing, and I'll put an electric hoist on the back of the side by side. I went to the Chinese tool store and built me a contraption, and I'll post a picture on the video show of this contraption. But I can just back up to a deer like a tow truck and just hoist it right up into the back of the truck, and got a new hoist under the shed and a place to clean deer. And so yeah.
Well, I showed you a picture of that huge buck we call Frank the Tank on my property. I kind of don't want to go hunting by myself because if I kill him, I don't know how in the world I'd get that thing in the truck. He got to be 250 pounds or bigger. He's a monster, and I'm like, I got to have some help. I'm getting too old for that.
We got a question, Paul. Let's get to fishing stuff. We got a question. The gentleman sent a question in, which, by the way, I think it's TalonOutdoors@gmail.com is our email account. Does that sound right?
I think that is right.
Talon Outdoors Show.
That's right.
Talon Outdoors Show @gmail.com. You can send in questions, and we might answer them. So a gentleman sent in a question. This is probably more up my alley because I have an exact same setup this guy has. He's got a fish pond at the house.
Right.
He's got a dock. He goes out, and they sling fish food out there, and the fish just churn and fish.
Right.
I love that. A couple times a year, they like to go out with the kids and try to catch fish. The problem is the fish won't bite crickets and worms.
They're waiting on their food.
Waiting on them pellets.
They've been conditioned.
Yeah, so that's what I told him was I think probably, my kids go out there and will take a piece of that fish food and stick it on a hook and they'll catch a fish, but they're not. But you go out there with crickets and you're not getting hardly any bites at all.
Right.
So do you think that's really the case, that they're just conditioned to eating the fish food?
I don't know the science to it, but it's funny how they'll be biting a certain color worm or tot one, and all of a sudden it seems like, and everybody else finds out about it, then that kind of bite goes away a little bit. But I think there probably is.
Probably
For
just so probably needs to just focus on a different
Because
kind of bait.
I used to catch shiners on Lake Jackson, and I'd put out hog finisher, and they'd get in there. Then once I got them coming, I'd just take my rod and I'd shake the water and I'd catch them. I wouldn't throw out no feed. And when I'd leave, I'd throw out some feed and go catch some more somewhere else.
Huh. I'll be doggone. I don't ask if that's legal or not, but
It's a bait fish. It's okay. I hope.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hey,
Or back then it was.
well,
That was a statute of limitations up either way. So.
Oh, okay. Hey, well, he did say I used to. I used to. Yeah.
We used to. My uncle's pond had a pond, and we'd throw fish feed out, and once they ate all the fish food, they'd hit pretty much anything else that hit the water. But we would take the little tiny pellets of fish food and put it on a brim hook, throw it out there, and they'd eat.
Yep,
and just catch them with that.
That's right.
It just those little things don't stay on there long. And I remember when I was a kid, my aunt Jimmy, she's passed on a long time ago, but she would not eat a brim out of the pond that you had caught on a worm, on a wiggler, right? She would make dough balls out of flour or whatever else. She had a recipe to make a dough ball with it, and as long as you caught the fish, or as long as you told her you caught the fish on the dough ball, she would eat them. Now go figure that. But she wouldn't. Buddy, she wouldn't touch one that had been caught with a wiggler.
Granny, you understand? They're eating all kinds of stuff out there in that pond.
Long as you didn't catch it with a worm, she was fine with it. She'd eat it. But buddy, she'd make up dough balls, and she meant you better catch her fish with them dough balls.
Didn't your mom catch one when we would shell cracker fish that day without
empty
a worm?
hook? Yeah,
empty hook. Dropped it in there and caught one.
Yeah, little gold Aberdeen or whatever they call them, little gold hook.
Sure did.
That's my mama's fishing luck right there, though, buddy. I think she'd catch fish out of a mud puddle.
I had a blast with them. That was fun.
So what's going on in the fishing world?
Well, I tell you what, there's a tournament going on right now in Lake Seminole. Not a big one, but first place is $10,000. There's like 21 boats in it, so 1 in 21 chance of
Wow.
10 grand. That was like a trail. They're classics here, but man, the bite has been pretty good. They're hitting buzz baits. Then they're also hitting top water Zara spooks. They've been hitting that pretty good. Of course, they're still hitting worms up there. But with this cold front coming in, I think it's going to be on Thursday. It's going to be in the 70s. I'm looking for them crappie to really start stacking up. That's some of the best eating fish on the lake.
You get excited about speck fishing, don't you?
I do. I started, I've always bass fished for my whole life, and I started doing about 3 or 4 years ago when that live come out. Mm-hmm. And guys, that's just something. You see the fish, the school of them. You throw your bait out here, watch your bait fall, and then the fish comes up and hits it. It's just
like fishing in an aquarium.
It really. Now I've learned, Charlie. The first time I got it, I went out and caught 75 in a row. I'd pitch out there and watch it fall and watch it. Well, that was November, the perfect time of the year. I was like, man, this live scope stuff's easy. And then I realized the fish change throughout the year. Then it gets a little more difficult. But it is fun. Everybody I've had done it, they enjoy it.
What you did was you said, this is too easy, and you jinxed yourself.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
And it got hard from then on.
And you're catching 2 pound, pound and a half to 2.5 pound fish with 4 pound test line, super light tackle. Right. And there's, we've talked about beetle spinning for brim and all that stuff. That is light tackle fishing for a fish that's pretty close to the line class that you're fishing with.
That's right.
Is way more fun than winching one in on.
That's right.
Winching in a 5 pound fish on 60 pound test, because you got to play different.
Like I told you a couple of years ago, I had a customer. He goes, "Look at that big fish looking at my bait," and I'm thinking it's a catfish, and he hooked it, and it's got it up the boat, 11 pounder.
Yeah,
bass. Couldn't believe it. 4 pound test line.
Catching big fish on little tackle is when your fish is outclassing your line, then it's a lot of fun. There's nothing wrong with that.
Fat man and
little cook. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Man, what a good show today.
Man. We need more cowbell. All right, we'll be back next week. We'll see y'all.